Welcome to Bovine Banter with the Penn State Extension Dairy Team. I'm Daniela Roland, and I'm a dairy educator based in Franklin County. Joining us today is dairy farmer Neil Hertzler, and we're going to talk about managing heat stress on pasture-based dairy farms. Thank you for joining us today, Neil. So to get us started, could you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your dairy operation?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Neil Hertzler. I dairy with my wife, Kyla. We are in Perry County, Pennsylvania, just north of Carlisle. And so we also have four sons that are involved. And we have my brother-in-law also works with us. And then we also have other various part-time and full-time employees. So we milk about roughly 240 to 250 cows. We are organic. We are 100% grass-fed organic. And so we rely heavily on grazing, almost fully on grazing whenever we can. As far as milking parlor, we have a swing 16 that my dad and I put in way back in 2000. So it's a New Zealand style parlor. And our only regret is we wish we would have made it bigger. So but that was 20 some years ago. So yeah, that's basically it. That's what we're doing.
Okay, great. So on the grazing side, can you talk about your grazing setup and what you have for your pastures?
Yeah. So let's see, we have about 350 acres of pasture between my dad's farm and my farm, which my farm is the main dairy. And my dad has one farm and then a couple little farms that aren't too far away that we use for our replacements and things. We have cow lanes that my dad put in back in the 90s. Our parlor and our barns are kind of on the one corner of the 300 acres where we graze the milk cows on 200 acres. Basically, we have to graze the milk cows. And not ideally, the barn is at the one corner of the property. So if you're setting up a grazing dairy, it would be much better to have it somewhere in the center of the property rather than at the corner. But we deal with it. The cows have to walk a little bit further at times, but it still works okay. The cows go out after every milking. We milk twice a day. Cows go to pasture after each milking to a different spot. So we're rotating every 12 hours basically. Our rotation is for most of the year, we try to not go back in that pasture for 30 days, somewhere around that length of time, so to give the pasture enough rest. And with the exception of this time of year when the grass is growing like crazy, then we shorten that a little bit, and then we make hay off of the excess pasture that the places we can't get to.
Then one thing, can you talk a little bit about your barn setup? How are the cows housed if it's bad weather or then when they're not going out on pasture?
Yeah, so we have freestyle barns, rather old ones that my dad put in way back in the 80s. Let's see, we have a couple of those around surrounding the milking parlor. And so we still use them. They don't get used. I mean, this time of year, the cows are barely coming in. We give them a little bit of feed, a little bit of kind of a haylage and baleage mix, but they don't eat a lot this time of year when the grazing is good. And then two of the older barns, the stalls were just giving me all kinds of trouble. So we ripped all the stalls out. We turned those into more of a compost bedded pack. They're not quite ideal. They're not quite tall enough, but they've been working okay for now, just sort of just getting by with them.
Okay, great. Thanks for sharing that. So what are some strategies that you use to help reduce heat stress in your milking herd during the summer?
Yeah, well, there's a few. I mean, and these are the same things we've been doing probably for years. Maybe we've improved on them some, but I think one of the biggest ones is just we try to get them out early in the morning, as early as possible. We have gotten a little bit lazier with our start times in the morning, so that doesn't help. But we just try to get them out as early as we can. And that way, they can get out there. They can get a good bit of dry matter from the grass, before it gets too hot. So that's one of them. Just getting them out there early. Then, out in the pasture, we've tried to. Well, initially we've put the daytime pastures where there was more trees. Daytime pastures are further away, which isn't good for heat stress really, but it's just so nice to have the cows closer at night so you can get started earlier in the morning better. So they've got trees to kind of get under. The problem with 250 cows is they can make a mess real quick under trees. We try to graze pretty tight in tight paddocks because they can, eat more, and then we just move them more rapidly. But But so they can make a mess under trees. So that's something to you really have to kind of manage. But if you're moving them quickly, one day they're in one section, the next day you move them another to the next section, and you kind of keep them out of the grass comes back under the trees, no problem. I've been planting more trees over the last 5 years, trying to get just more shade for them and spread out enough that the light can still get in to keep the grass growing. But that's a slow process to get trees up. I guess the biggest thing we do then is besides that, as far as we try to let them in whenever they tell us to. Whenever they kind of look like they've had enough of the heat, we just bring them back into the barn. We have fans to try to keep them cool. We don't have a ton of fans. We've been adding slowly more fans, and I also a year or so ago put a simple one mister in so they can kind of nosy over to it, cool off a little bit. And so they're getting used to that, and they seem to like that too. So I might add a few more misters at some spots where they can get to. That's pretty much the what we do for heat management.
Okay, great. That's good. How about in the parlor? Do you all have any fans either in the holding, if you have a holding pen or in the parlor?
Yeah, we have more fans probably in the holding area than anywhere else, and in the parlor. Yeah, so there's lots of fans around the parlor. I forgot to mention that flies is a big deal too, and especially on an organic dairy, it's hard for us to quite control flies as easily. But controlling flies on pasture is important because they flies just make tend to make them bunch up, and so if you can try to somehow control the flies, that makes a big difference too. Which I don't claim to have any great knowledge on controlling flies. It's hard to do organically.
Sure, that makes sense. But it's good if you're aware of that and are trying to control it as best you can. That's good. That's a good point too about the bunching with the cows to try to avoid that. On the water side, what do you have as far as watering systems out on pasture? And have you made any changes with that or improvements over the years?
Yeah, so my dad originally we have 1 inch the black pipe that he originally when he set his grazing system up and the fences he put it above the ground along the lanes, and so we had water at every paddock. Somewhere along the way, him and I decided to bury a good percentage of it. We were putting in some irrigation lines anyway, so we decided to bury it. So that's helped with keeping it cooler. When it sat there along, above ground, it tended to be hotter, to get warmed up by the sun. Yeah, we keep water almost at every paddock they would have water in, or they can get to water somewhere. We have big, I don't know how many, but quite a few bigger tanks or say waters at the barn too. So when they come back in, they can really tank up on whatever they need if they couldn't get enough in the pasture.
So, with the hotter weather in the summer months, do you change any of your management practices, like on the breeding side, or not sure what you do for vaccinations, anything there that you change? And if so, can you explain?
Well, yeah, I think the biggest thing would be on the breeding side. We started, I don't know, I came back to the farm, right at 2000 or somewhere there, and I wanted to go all spring seasonal. It was, most grazers were trying to do that back then. I think still are maybe. The easiest way to do it, or that we decided to try anyway, was to just to go split season first, right? So we pushed everybody to the spring or the fall. Well, it turned out we just stuck with that. We liked it. We felt like it worked good. And so we've been split season calving since then. So we calve probably half of our cows in the spring from right around March 1st. I've kind of stretched it out. I used to keep it a little tighter, but March 1st to right about now, June 1st. And then we calved the rest about August 15th to, again, I stretched it out a little bit closer to November, maybe even November 15th. So 3 months basically. And the nice thing about this in the summer is I can dry probably not half the herd because I don't dry them all up quite at one time, but dry a bunch up here in June when it starts to get hot. And that means we can get the milking done quicker. I don't feel like the dry cows, they handle the heat stress a little better. So that's kind of probably our biggest strategy as far as breeding and what we do to handle kind of to help with that heat stress, so we don't have to worry about it so much. If that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Thanks. I'm gonna skip down on the questions to dry cows then. Are dry cows all out on pasture then, or do you keep them in the barn during the summer months? How do you help them during the hot weather?
Yeah, they are out on pasture, but just like everything has access to come back to a barn or some shade of some sort. They also have plenty of trees. They get moved. They probably stay in the same pasture for about 3 days, and we try to make their rotation 30 days as well. A lot of times they'll come in during the day, like if it's closer to lunch, they'll come in and stand in the barn for a little bit, but then they go back out later. So they also need fly control, so we try to keep them sprayed with some, natural fly control, which also helps. So that's pretty much it's almost the same management as the milk cows.
So, with your replacement heifers, do you do anything different for those, or are they all on pasture? How do you raise your heifers and how do you manage them?
Yeah, so they are also all on pasture, much like the dry cows. The dry cows occasionally we might give them some dry hay during the summer or something, but they don't, especially if it would get dry. The heifers and the young stock normally don't need anything. We have enough pasture for them that they can go quite a while unless it gets really dry, where we don't supplement them anything other than minerals. So they are getting rotated much like the dry cows, probably every 2 days. And parts of the year, we even try to be more aggressive than that, trying to tighten up the paddock, just to get them to eat it down and moving them, maybe closer to once a day, just for growth and things too. But they have the same thing. It's not ideal setup. Our barns aren't quite big enough, the old barns we have for them, but they'll come in and get some shade, and they have water at the barn, and again, fly control for them as well. So it's pretty much the same thing on all of our heifers or in our even our yearlings. They can get shade, but they also have some trees and things too.
Okay, great. So, what are some factors that dairy producers should consider if they're thinking about switching to grazing? Do you have any recommendations or tips?
There's probably lots of factors to consider. Something I think, maybe you don't realize if you're switching to grazing, it's I think I've always said it's kind of a different it's not necessarily less work. It is in certain areas, but it's a different kind of work. So I think, for example, and our part of it's because our barns, the setup isn't quite right for grazing, but it still works, and we'd still rather, send the cows out. But there's not as much work, in the barns, cleaning up after the cows, feeding the cows, but there's still a good bit of work, just animal movement, just moving them to different pastures. And we spend a great deal of time trying to keep our fences maintained, trying to keep our lanes maintained, just moving animals from different pastures. We have a road that we have to go through, so that's a little bit of a challenge. It's not a busy road, but just still takes an extra person to stand there when the cows come in during the day. So there's just a lot of things like that to consider. Just um, the way you set up the pastures and just makes a difference in all that.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. As a producer, when you have questions about heat stress for your type of setup, where do you go to find out more information or what resources do you use?
Yeah, I think that most of the time, I would go to another fellow farmer or grazer and just see what's working for them. Also, there's industry people that have experience, maybe even a salesman that's been what's worked for somebody else. There's also there's numerous winter meetings around, with grazing groups, and that there's a wealth of information there, and again, other grazers there that you can kind of network with and see what's working. There's a few magazines, that the main one I can think of that's just really good is Graze, and that one has a lot of information for grazing, and they do a really good job of just topics that are relevant, especially this time of year. They would talk about heat stress and things like that. So I think that's good. Other than that, I might just Google, see what I can find.
Right, there's always that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what are your top take-home messages about grazing during the summer months that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and I think that something that I always tell my sons or the guys that work for us is, the summer months you can get really busy, doing hay, lots of things to do, and sometimes it's real easy to forget about the cows, and maybe where you put the cows in the morning, where. And so I always tell them the cows have to come first.
That's a great point. Well, thank you, Neil, for taking the time to talk with us today. We appreciate it. And thank you to all of our listeners. If you have any further questions about this topic, please feel free to email me at djr 6158 at psu.edu. And be sure to tune in for our next episode airing June 11th, where we will be discussing feeding strategies and heat stress. Thank you for listening.